Hey everybody, welcome to Full Throttle Driving Academy. I'm Brian.
I'm Dana.
We are married, just to get that out of the way, so we will have some healthy
Lucky
banter.
me. Um,
Today's
Today, go ahead. We are going to talk about how to learn a track, whether you're a beginner or an expert driver. How are you going to learn a track that you've never been to? Because everybody has a different way of doing it. And we all know that my way is always the right way, but Brian has opinions too.
oh, she's already just going for it, isn't she? Well, let's test her out on this hypothesis first that she's better at learning a track. So why don't you tell us, oh wise
He's a better
sage,
driver, so.
how do you go about learning a new track? And how long does it take?
Okay. So we've had a lot of discussions on this, and it's not an easy question. I personally like to number the corners. So, and I also divide it up into segments. So in my head, I read, okay, back up the track. So I start with a track map, and I'm going to read the track map. I'm going to look at it and go, not telling me a whole lot here. Not telling me a lot. So then I have to figure out,
Are you saying you find the track map on the track website or the organizer's website and you physically print that off?
yeah,
And you're holding a piece of paper with the map of the track and you're looking at it.
uh-huh.
And then you try to like memorize that.
Yeah, that kind of
It
thing.
doesn't work for you?
Track maps, I mean, kind of okay for a start, but not my best way of learning.
Okay, so then what?
Oh gosh, we're still focusing on me. I find it helpful to watch other people's videos. I have to admit, I I don't do as much preparation as Brian does or other drivers do. So I kind of just go ride by the seat of my pants sometimes. But yeah, I will watch videos so that I can try and learn the track. We were at a track recently where nobody had been on that track before. It was a brand new track, so there weren't many videos to choose from. So just had to feel our way through. But I do have one little trick that I think is really helpful for me. So I memorize it in segments and then turn by turn, which I number, which I know isn't always the best way to do it. But I also find it helpful. Okay, here's a secret you don't even know. When I was in high school and college, I used to make myself tests before an exam. I would make a 400 question, 500 question test, and I would take it over and over and over again, and I'd flunk it every time, and finally I'd get it right, and darn if I didn't ace those exams. So that's kind of what I do. I make myself a little test. Can I take my heel and rub, a mark in the sand and make this track? Am I memorizing it that well?
Explain that. What do you mean?
Like, I'll just drag my foot and, okay, here's turn one, here's turn two.
You mean like in the sand, you'll draw the track with your foot?
Yeah, with my heel. I just back it up and draw it with my heel.
Huh.
And then I get done and like, wow, the thing doesn't even match up. It's not even close. But at least I'm trying to make my brain go from turn one to turn two to three.
Mental imagery. So
Yeah.
you're imagining driving the track, and then you're attempting to recreate the track in the sand, drawing it with a stick or your foot or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
a stick might be easier than my heel. Like
Could be.
Yeah.
You're going in reverse.
That's a good idea.
Look like a
I
horse.
should learn from the chimps and use a tool, but the
You're
stick would be
fairly
a good idea.
advanced. You might want to step up.
So
to a stick.
I'm not the best to talk to about memorizing a track. I know it's critically important. You have to know what is coming up next. Otherwise, it's like being on a hike and you're watching your feet and then all of a sudden you hit a log and it's like, dang, if I had just looked up 10 feet ago, I would have walked around the log and now I got to figure out how to get around it. So you don't want to watch your feet. You want to predict what's coming next so that you're always 2 or 3 steps ahead or turns ahead in a course.
Does part of this learning block for you on the track map and the videos have to do with the type of learner that you are? Being
You mean slow?
a slow learner. I mean,
Are you saying something here?
she's a a little slow.
I learn differently than you do. You can read a book, oh, Speed Secrets, look, now I know everything. Now I'm a great race car driver. Well, I can't do that. I read it and I'm like, what? It's not the same. Kinesthetic learner.
Kinesthetic learner.
Yeah.
So you need to feel it. You need to sense it.
I do. And even then, I need to do it over and over again before I really memorize that track.
Okay. And we'll get into that then, because we'll talk about your first session on the track and how you should approach learning the track when you're actually behind the wheel. Or if you have an instructor driving the first session for 2 or 3 laps, take that opportunity and ride in the right seat, chill out, and then you can get an assault on your senses and just see what is going on without actually having to drive the vehicle.
Yeah. Assault on your senses, definitely.
All right. So everything she said is completely wrong. Let's just start with that.
All right. How do you memorize a track?
I think, like, I don't know how you're such a fast driver, honestly, because she is a very, very accomplished driver. And because she's a kinesthetic learner, I know she's going to have to drive 3 or 4 sessions before everything sinks in and she starts getting fluid and she relaxes and she starts to push the limits of the car.
Did you just call me slow again?
No, but she learns really, really fast as soon as she gets behind the wheel. And then also post-session reviews. So we'll talk about that. How do you improve every successive session? Put it all together. My technique for learning a track is a little bit different than yours.
You don't dig your heel in the sand?
I do like that, actually.
Yeah.
Good idea. Videos. First and foremost, I do look at the track map. I also try to look at the track map and try to choose what I feel will be the optimal line without actually seeing the in-car camera footage or any sort of Google Earth view or something, because the problem with the track map, the 3 or 4 problems, just the main thing right off the bat.
One-dimensional.
Flat, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't show you elevation changes. It also doesn't show you camber. It also doesn't show you the curbs on the inside toward the apex. It doesn't show you the surface of the track on the exit of the corners, which you can or cannot use, depending. It doesn't show you the surface of the track either, the variability of the track surface, because they could repave a certain portion of the track and you don't know it unless you actually can see it and feel it. So track map is just a very simple starting point. But the cool part about track maps for me is I can take notes and draw a line on the track with a pencil, and then I can see what I thought was going to happen and then modify that based on what really happened. So it's just a starting point. And then you can take notes on the track map. I think it's kind of important to use the track map to prioritize the corners. And what I mean by that is if you're looking at the whole thing, why is that funny?
Because we get into this all the time. You talk about, I'm going to compromise this corner. I'm going to look through that corner. I'm just like, just drive. I don't get it.
I'm into giving practical, applicable tips that any driver can benefit from. And one of the things that occurs to me every time I get out there, some corners matter more than others. And what I find most often, not always, if there's a fast, scary corner that has a straightaway after it, that's usually the most highest priority corner. A lot of people say it's the corner before the longest straightaway on the track is the most important corner. I rarely find that to be the case. Why is that so funny?
Because you analyze this so much more than I do. I'm just like, and somehow I end up being okay, semi-fast. But I don't, you prioritizing corners. Like, aren't they all important?
No, some are more important than others.
Okay. Listen to him, not me.
All right. If you're going to watch videos, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. Videos matter. Okay?
We're going to come
videos
up with a t-shirt.
Matter.
Videos matter.
Good videos matter. Okay. This might be counterintuitive because some people are just going to the track for the first time they'll be watching this. I still contend, and I'm happy to debate with you, I don't know why this is so funny to you.
Okay.
I like to watch race videos. I pick somebody who's not necessarily the first place driver, but I watch the second or third place driver and I pick a video of a race. I like to see the start of the race. I like to see a driver who's going to be behind the leader, typically, and I know those are the fast people. Just pick any organization where you watch a club race or a NASA race or a Spec Miata race, whatever. Pick a race and pick somebody who's fast, because the fast people are going to be driving at the limit. They're going to show you the optimal line because what's our famous quote about the line?
The line happens?
The line is a consequence of driving the car at the limit.
Okay, but wait. Here's my problem with watching a race video versus a time trial video. So when you're watching a racing video, you're watching people who are wheel to wheel and they're not necessarily on the best line. So if you're a beginner and you're watching that, you're going to think, wow, maybe the best line is over here because that guy's really fast, when that is not the best line for a beginner time trialer.
That is absolutely true.
I got one right.
Argument, my counterpoint would be, on any given track, you very well may find yourself off the optimal line. In fact, it happens all the time. Excuse me. If you miss an apex by 5 feet, you're naturally way off the line. On your entry, you missed it, and your exit's going to be pushed out further and earlier than you wanted it to. You're going to be, at some point, you're going to be driving all kinds of different lines on the track, especially when you're learning a track. So I think it's beneficial to see where can people drive offline and still make mistakes.
But how does a beginner know that that was offline as opposed to, oh, that's the line I should take next time?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
So that's why I pick a video where somebody's in second or third place and they're not doing a lot of passing necessarily, but they're kind of doing a lead follow where, you know, they realize that maybe the first place driver is a little faster than the second place driver and maybe gradually pulling away, and they're both driving kind of the optimal line, but they're not doing a lot of moves and stuff like that. I'm just trying to find who's driving the car at the limit, because they are essentially required then to drive the optimal line. And we will explain that in a different video because it's fairly technical.
Yeah, let's go back to memorizing the track, because this is all about memorizing the track.
So memorizing the track, I feel like it's all about repetition. So if you pick videos of, you want to find good drivers is the bottom line. You don't want to watch some guy who says, hey, I got a Porsche GT3 RS and I'm out here with my GoPro, and he's driving around the middle of the track. You know, you have to avoid the riffraff.
But what if you don't have access to videos? Like, we went to a track recently that nobody had driven on. And so what if there are no videos? How do you memorize
I
a track?
found good videos on that track, actually.
Okay.
Because
Bad
YouTube,
example.
everyone posts
There's
stuff
going to
on
be a
YouTube.
track where somebody doesn't have videos to watch. So how do you do it without the videos?
Well, then you're limited to really an aerial view of Google Earth, which is kind of helpful because if you see a satellite view of the track, you can then see the curbs and you can see some
So
slight...
you do most of it before you get on? I'm saying, what about when you're on the track? How do you memorize it?
So you're talking first session driving.
Yeah, basically.
How do you learn the track?
I mean, yeah, because
Okay.
pictures and videos can tell you so
Great.
much, but then you're on the track.
All right, so we're skipping the whole preparation phase. We're jumping now. Just forget all the preparation, which I think is 80% of it, but let's just jump right
You
into
can
the
go
last
back to it.
20%. Your first session, how do you approach that? Why don't you tell us how you approach your very first session on a brand new track when you're by yourself with no instructor?
Slowly. I mean, I don't want to go out and prove anything on my first lap. And we did just do a track recently that very few people had ever been on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Brand new
so,
track.
and certainly I had never been on it. You hadn't been on it. None
Mm-hmm.
of the people in our group had been on it. And so went out there slowly, just thinking, you know, take it turn by turn. And I had watched a couple of videos, but there weren't that many videos. So it was really more about feeling the track slowly taking it in slow-mo and taking it turn by turn and then segment by segment. So every 3 to 4 to 5 turns, depending on the course, is going to be a segment. And then just memorizing that. So you always have to know what's coming up. You can't be flying by the seat of your pants all the time.
So predicting rather than reacting.
Yeah.
You have to know what's coming before it's actually in front of you. And you have to then, in order to do that, you have to memorize every single corner. In order to memorize every single corner, you have to take in all the sensory inputs available to you, because often tracks are in the middle of the desert and they may not have a lot of good visual cues. So let's give some advice on visual cues the first session. Do you find the flag worker stations on your very first session on your outlap?
Well, I know the correct answer to that is supposed to be yes.
And do you wave at them?
Yes.
Do you?
Well, I do.
Yeah,
But you know
she
me.
waves.
I mean, I wave at everybody on the street.
we're-
Hey!
We're talking about the flag workers are there to save your life. They're there for your protection and safety. If you need to find every single flag worker station, some of them are manned or unmanned. Some of them now are getting more electronic at the nicer tracks, and they'll have lights and stuff that flash. But you want to find those people, look them in the eye as you're driving on your out lap, the first lap, and you want to give them a wave because you're acknowledging them. They are people and they're there for your benefit. So acknowledge them. They work their butts off and it's usually really hot.
And so we're talking about memorizing a track.
Right. So the point of that is if you are so focused on what's right in front of you and you don't have the mental bandwidth and you're stressed out, then you need to chill out and take a few deep breaths, loosen your hands a bit, and find the flag workers, because you need to be able to take in all the inputs available to you, not just what's in front of you, but the flag stations. The next thing you'll notice is the brake. Often tracks will have brake marker numbers, and sometimes they put them on the wrong side of the track, which is the opposite side of the track you're going to be turning into. Like if you're going to make a left-hand turn, so they put the brake markers on the right. I never understood that. It would be, but they usually have numbers indicating how close you are to the end of the braking zone, usually starting with the 3, 4,
But how do you
3, 2,
memorize
1.
all this? So you're talking about your first time on the track, you're talking about things to pay attention to, which is really important.
Right.
But let's get back to how do you memorize the track?
By taking in all this information, your brain is starting to memorize patterns.
And how long does it take you to memorize a track?
I memorize the track before I show up. I mean, reality is if I want to be prepared enough that if it's, especially on a shorter track, like a track with 12, 14 corners, I've driven it in my mind enough times and I've watched enough laps on videos that by the time I show up for my first session, I know that which direction the corners are going to be going, and I know where I am on the track, but I don't know what speeds I'm capable of on those corners. And that's what I have to learn. Is the first session for me is I try to drive the optimal line, even if I'm going a little bit slower than I'm going to ultimately end up doing. But I still want to make sure that I'm driving what I feel is going to be pretty close to the racing line or the time trial line. And then what I'm trying to do is probably go out around 90% for me.
Your first time on a track.
Yeah, I want to go fast, but I'm not sliding the car. I'm still braking hard because I want to emulate what it's going to feel like at the end of the straightaway. I never want to like soft brake at the end of a straightaway because that's completely unrealistic as to how it's going to be.
So do you not take it easy on the first time like I do? I was just saying I take it really easy my first time to learn it.
I take it on the very first lap. It's usually under yellow flag.
Yeah.
Typically no passing. So on the first lap, I'm going all on sensory overload. I'm trying to soak in the sounds, the sights, the feel. I'm looking at the pavement. I'm trying to understand where there's grip, like if I'm in a braking zone and I'm feeling good grip. I'm really paying attention to the curbing especially on the inside of a corner where you'll hit the apex. I want to see if that curbing can be run over or not. If it's shallow and smooth, can I
How are
use?
you memorizing all this?
Because you're just
feeling
you're
it.
soaking it in, and
So I think a really important thing to note here is that Brian is an exceptional driver. He's unreal. And he has an entirely different way of thinking about driving and memorizing driving and just the physics involved. We're entirely different. And I'm not a terrible driver. I do okay. So I think the important thing to note is that if you read books and go, wow, this doesn't resonate, or if you're hearing somebody like Brian talk about analyzing corners and compromising corners and doing all this, really intricate thought process around how he's driving, that's awesome. But that's not for everybody. It's not for me. I give it a lot less thought, and I still somehow manage to be relatively fast. So I want people to understand that it's okay if you don't need to know what a slip angle is, or you don't need to know all the technical terms, and you don't need to put quite as much thought into the physics behind it unless you love that. If you do, you're going to be a better driver than I am.
I have some more practical tips then, maybe.
Okay, good.
That would be simpler.
Go for it.
Memorize the track. She mentioned early on, she breaks the track into segments. So you're thinking more divide the track into thirds, maybe?
Yeah, depending on how many turns there are.
And I do the same thing. I just didn't really realize it until maybe yesterday when we talked about it. But I think of the track in sections as well. It's usually sections of complexity, or all these corners that are sort of linked together. Usually on a track, there's like one or two really good straightaways. And so the easiest way to learn the track, I think, is, at the end of the first straightaway is turn one. Master turn one, because usually that corner is not going to be as complicated as some of the other turns on the track, because it's at the end of a straightaway. They don't want people flying off the track, so it's going to be a maximum braking zone at the end of the long straightaway usually, and it could be a 90-degree corner, it could be a hairpin, who knows, it could be a bus stop. But you want to memorize turn one and get that thing dialed in. Use that first session, and then tack on memorizing turn 2 and 3, and kind of by the time you're done with session 1, maybe you've memorized the first third of the track, maybe 5 or 6 corners, right? And then the next session out, pick the corners that you want to keep working on to learn, and I would recommend find the slowest corners on the track to work on first if you're a beginner. So if you have a hairpin corner, it's going to be really slow. Try to work on your exit coming out of a slow corner, because it's safer to start applying throttle coming out of a slow corner. It's a much lower consequence environment.
Woo! That's going to get us into a discussion in a different session where we talk about positioning at an apex, because hitting that apex close isn't the key. It's hitting it at the right angle. So we'll get into that too.
And the corners to learn last on a track are going to be what I call the scary corners. These are the
Scary corners.
balls corners.
Yeah. And you don't have to have testes to have balls.
Good point. The fastest corner on the track is the one where differences are made between, intermediates and advanced drivers. And for beginners too, that's where you're probably going to have the most improvement over the course of a weekend, is going to be those fast, scary corners, because they require
Yes, I agree.
They require courage, and your natural defense mechanisms kick in. Your amygdala is going to fire. You're in fight or flight mode. So I think the other thing about learning a track, force yourself to widen your view and widen your eyes, because your natural tendency will be you're stressed, you're in a highly aroused state, your heart rate's going to be really high from the stress. So concentrate on, it sounds crazy, it's simple. Breathe, really focus on breathing deep, slow down your breathing. Soft hands, right?
We get the death grip. Man, I
Don't-
find
if you-
myself going, "Ugh."
Every time you come on the main straightaway, develop a routine.
Yeah.
I loosen one hand, loosen the other, take 2 or 3 deep breaths, and get into a ritual where you're forcing your heart rate to go down 5 or 10 beats on that main straightaway, because that's the time to relax if there's any. And then work on the low speed corners, the safe corners, and then gradually work your way up to the mediums and then the fast speed corners.
Yeah. So in memorizing the track, you're saying you start with memorizing the slower corners first.
I'd have to think about that. I think I memorize.
Or do you do them consecutively?
I memorize sections of the track that are linked by if corners are linked together without straightaways. I try to memorize those as chunks, and I try to figure out the best way through those chunks. And usually tracks have several of those where there's not a big straightaway. It's just a lot of different types of corners that are kind of really close together.
Okay.
Those are challenging.
So in some of the future videos, we're going to be talking about things like positioning at the apex and driving technique and braking and trail braking and all these other fun things. But as far as memorizing a track goes, because we all have to be on a track we've never been on before, do you think we've covered it?
I think there are a couple more tips that you use well.
Okay.
Let a driver who's better than you go in front of you, even if they're in a slow car. Recently, she was at a track. She's in a really, really fast car, GT4 Club Sport. And then there's a guy in a spec Boxster, which only has 200 horsepower. But we know him well. He's a phenomenal driver. So we let him pass her, and now she's following him. He's in a much slower car. But by her staying behind him, she's learning the lines because he knew the track. Find the people who know the track and tuck in behind them. Point people by. These are usually point by passing, where you have to stick your hand out the window to signal that you want people to safely pass you. This is in a high performance driving event. And if somebody catches you in the corners, that means they're faster than you, period, full stop. I don't care if you're in a Porsche Turbo S. If a Boxster spec is catching you at any point on the track, they have faster lap times than you, and you will learn more from them by letting them by than by drag racing them down the straightaway. So that's another great way to learn the track.
That's a great point. And I think putting your ego aside is so important because, you know, I mentioned I go out slowly my first few laps if I'm on a track I don't know, and other people might be going, oh my God, she's really slow. I don't care what other people are thinking. I want to learn the track, and I want to follow a Boxster spec, even though I'm in, you know, a much faster car, because I know that guy has a really good line. So yeah, putting your ego aside is so important.
Put your ego aside, but also don't get discouraged, because if you're not learning the track quickly and it's not coming natural to you, just take solace in the fact that when you go to bed that first night, you're going to sleep so well, and your brain is going to assimilate all of the information that you accumulated that day. And the next morning, you'll be amazed at how much better you memorize that track.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So another couple last pointers. After your first session is the time to debrief with yourself. Go get in a quiet environment if you can, and look again at the track map, or if you have an in-car video system, watch it immediately, and see if you can then close your eyes and walk yourself through a lap in your mind, mental imagery, and see if you've memorized the track. See if you can predict every corner. Drive the lap in your mind at the speed you want to be driving, and go through every single corner and see if you can predict what's coming next. And if you can do that for the entire track, then you're in prediction mode, not reaction mode.
Yep, absolutely key. All right, I think that was great on learning a new track, whether you're a beginner or an expert driver. So
if you really want to learn a track, let her drive and you sit in the right seat.
Meaning what?
If she's your instructor, you'll learn the track really fast, is my point.
Anyway, we have a lot of fun out there, and that's what matters. So thanks for joining us on this session, and we'll be taking you through lots more fun stuff coming up.
Stay fast.